Hello. Gonna try to get further in the book today. Hopefully you guys will be able to hear me. Okay. Let's see. Where was this one? A drowsy, dreamy influence seems to hang over the land and to pervade the very atmosphere. Some say that the place was bewitched by a high German doctor during the early days of the settlement. Others that an old Indian chief, the prophet or wizard of his tribe, held his powwows there before the country was discovered by Master Hendrik Hansen. Certain it is, the place still continues under the sway of some witching power that holds a spell over the minds of the good people, causing them to work in a continual revelry. They are given to all kinds of marvelous beliefs, are subject to trances and visions, and frequently see strange sights, and hear music and voices in the air. The whole neighborhood abounds with local tales, haunted spots, and twilight superstitions. Stars shoot and meteors glare oftener across the valley than in any other part of the country, and the nightmare with her whole ninefold seems to make it the favorite scene of her gambit. So they do have some art here. Guessing this is the witch. Let's see if I can. The witch cursing people, I suppose. I don't know what that is. The devil, maybe. Here's some more images. Yeah, horses. Weird looking person. Probably being, you know. See if I can move my. Trying to. Sorry. Okay. Back to it. The dominant spirit, however, that haunts this enchanted region, and seems to be commander-in-chief of all the powers of the air, is the apparition of a figure on a horseback without a head. It is said by some to be the ghost of a Hessian trooper whose head had been carried away by a cannonball in some nameless battle during the Revolutionary War, and who is ever and anon seen by the country folk, hurrying along in the gloom of the night as if on the wings of the wind. His haunts are not confined to the valley, but extends at times to the adjacent roads, and especially to the vicinity of a church at no great distance. Indeed, certain of the most authentic historians of those parts, who have been careful in collecting and collating the floating facts concerning the spectre, allege that, the body of the trooper having been buried in the churchyard, the ghost rides forth to the scene of battle in nightly quest of his head, and that the rushing speed with which he sometimes passes along the hollow, like a midnight blast, is owing to his being belated and in a hurry to get back to the churchyard before daybreak. Such is the general purport of this legendary superstition, which has furnished materials for many a wild story in that region of shadows, and the spectre is known at all the country firesides by the name of the Headless Horseman, Sleepy Hollow. It is remarkable that the visionary propensity I have mentioned is not confined to the native inhabitants of the valley, but is unconsciously imbibed by every one who resides there for a time. However wide awake they may have been before they entered that sleepy region, they are sure in a little time to inhale the witching influence of the air and begin to grow imaginative, to dream dreams and see apparitions. I mention this peaceful spot with all possible loud, for it is in such little retired Dutch valleys, found here and there embosomed in the great state of New York, that population, manners, and customs remain fixed, while the great torrent of migration and improvement is making such incessant changes in other parts of this restless country sweeps by them unobserved. They are like those little nooks of still water which border a rapid stream, where we may see the straw and bubble riding quietly at anchor, or slowly revolving in the mimic harbor, undisturbed by the rush of the passing current. Though many years have elapsed since I trod the drowsy shades of Sleepy Hollow, yet I question whether I should not still find the same trees and same families vegetating in its sheltered bosom. In this byplace of nature there abode, in a remote period of American history, that is to say, some 30 years since, a worthy wight of the name of Ichabod Crane, who sojourned, or as he expressed it, tarried, in Sleepy Hollow for the purpose of instructing the children of the vicinity. He was a native of Connecticut, a state which supplies the Union with pioneers for the mind as well as for the forest, and sends forth yearly its legions of frontier woodsmen and country schoolmasters. The cognomen of Crane which was not inapplicable to his person. He was tall, but exceedingly light, with narrow shoulders, long arms and legs, hands that dangled a mile out of his sleeves, feet that might have served for shovels, and his whole frame mostly loosely hung together. His head was small and flat at top, with huge ears, large green glass eyes, and a long snipe nose, so that it looked like a weathercock perched upon his spindle neck. His tail, which way the wind blew, to see him striding along the profile of a hill on a windy day, with his clothes bagging and fluttering about him, one might have mistaken him for the genius of famine descending upon the earth, or some scarecrow eloped from a cornfield. His schoolhouse was a low building of one large room, rudely constructed of logs, the windows partly glazed and partly patched with leaves of old copybooks. It was most ingeniously secured at vacant hours by withe twisted in the handle, and stakes set against the window shutters, so that though a thief might get in with perfect ease, he would find some embarrassment in getting out. The idea must probably be borrowed by the architect Jost van Hoofden from the mystery of a nail pond. Here is the image. It's a scarecrow. The schoolhouse stood in a rather lonely but pleasant situation, just at the foot of the woody hill, with a brook running close by and a formidable birch tree growing at the end of it. From hence the low murmur of his pupils' voices, coming over their lessons, might be heard in a drowsy summer's day, like the hum of a beehive, interrupted now and then by the authoritative voice of the master in the tone of menace or command, or, peradventure, by the appalling sound of the birch, as he urged some tardy loiterer along the flowery path of knowledge. Truth to say, he was a conscientious man. He even bore in mind the golden maxim, spare the rod and spoil the child. Ichabod Crane's scholars certainly were not spoiled. I would not have it imagined, however, that he was one of those cool potentates of the school who joy in the smart of their subjects. On the contrary, he administered justice with discrimination rather than severity, taking the burden off the backs of the weak and laying it on those of the strong. You mere puny stripling that winced at the least flourish of the rod was passed by with indulgence. The claims of justice were satisfied by inflicting a double portion of some little tough, wrong-headed, broad-skirted Dutch urchin, who sulked and swelled and grew dogged and sullen beneath the birch. All this he called doing his duty by their parents, and he never inflicted a chastisement without following it by the assurance, so consolatory to the smarting urchin, that he would remember it and thank him for it the longest day he had to live. When school hours were over, he was even the companion and playmate of the larger boys, and on holiday afternoons would convoy some of the smaller ones home, who happened to have pretty sisters or good housewives for mothers, noted for the comforts of the cupboard. Indeed, it behooved him to keep on good terms with his pupils. The revenue arising from the school was small, and would have been scarcely sufficient to furnish him with daily bread. For he was a huge reader, and though lank, had the dilating powers of an anaconda. But to help out his maintenance he was, according to the country's custom in those parts, boarded and lodged at the house of the farmers, whose children he instructed. With these he lived successively a week at a time, thus going the rounds of the neighborhood with all his worldly effects tied up in a cotton handkerchief. All this might not be too onerous on the purses of his rustic patrons, who were apt to consider the cost of schooling a grievous burden, and schoolmasters as mere drones. He had various ways of rendering himself both useful and agreeable. He assisted the farmers occasionally in the lightest labors of their farms, helped to make hay, mended the fence, took the horses to water, drove the cows from the pasture, and cut wood for the winter fire. He laid aside, too, all the dominant dignity and absolute sway with which he lorded it in his little empire of the school, and became wonderfully gentle and ingratiating. He found favor in the eyes of the mothers by petting the child, particularly the youngest, and like the lion bold which William so magnanimously the lamb did hold. Williams. He would sit with the child on one knee and rock a cradle with his foot for whole hours together. In addition to his other vocations, he was a singing master of the neighborhood, and picked up many bright shillings by instructing the young folks in psalmody. It was a matter of no little vanity to him, on Sundays, to take his station in front of the church gallery, with a band of chosen singers wherein in his mind he completely carried away the palm from the parson. Certain it is, his voice rounded far above all the rest of the congregation. There are peculiar quavers still to be heard in that church, and which may ever be heard half a mile off, quite to the opposite side of the mill pond on a still Sunday morning, which are said to be legitimately descending from the nose. Think about Frank. By the way, here's the image of him. Yep, that's what they think he looks like. Thus by divers little makeshifts in that ingenious way which is commonly denominated by hook and by crook, the worthy Pendage got on tolerably enough, and was thought by all who understood nothing of the labour of head work to have a wonderfully easy life of it. The schoolmaster is generally a man of some importance in the female circle of a rural neighbourhood, being considered a kind of idle gentleman personage, of vastly superior taste and accomplishments to the rough country swains, and indeed inferior in learning only to the parson. His appearance therefore is apt to occasion some little stir at the tea-table of a farmhouse, and the addition of supernumerary dishes of cakes, or sweet meats, or, peradventure, the parade of a silver teapot. Our man of letters therefore was particularly unhappy in the smiles of all the country damsels, how he would figure among them in the churchyard between services on Sundays, gathering grapes for them from the wild vines that overrun from the surrounding trees, reciting for their amusements all the epitaphs on the tombstone, or sauntering, with a whole bevy of them, along the banks of the adjacent mill pond, while the more bashful country bumpkins hung sheepishly back, envying his superior elegance and address. From his half itinerant life he was a kind of travelling gazette, carrying the whole budget of local gossip from house to house, so that his appearance was always greeted with satisfaction. He was, moreover, esteemed by the woman as a man of great erudition, for he had read several books quite through, and was a perfect master of Cotton Mather's History of New England Witchcraft, in which, by the way, he most firmly and potently believed. Oh, it just, oh.